Hey there, welcome to Mark in the Park, the podcast. I'm your host, Mark Milow, speaker, storyteller, and healthcare advocate. And this is the place for personal reflections, stories about mindset, hobbies, and purpose. And a reminder that life doesn't stop at a diagnosis. In fact, often the real journey begins after. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Mark in the Park, the podcast. Today's episode is just you and I. I'm calling this episode The Story of You because I want to talk about how important you are, okay? And the reason I want to talk about that is because I've learned the importance of how important I am. There's a lot of discovery going on in my life right now, and I've learned some lessons. So I'm going to share some things tonight that is not going to be backed up by science or statistics. It's not going to be documented in the Wall Street Journal or the medical journals, things like that. I'm going to talk to you plainly and honestly and candidly from my heart. These are opinions. So anything I say today in today's show it's opinion. If I touch on anything medical, it's not medical advice. I'm just going to share some things that I've learned along the way on this journey, and I hope that some of our listeners out there will benefit from this. In fact, that's kind of the whole purpose of this podcast is, I talk about Mark in the Park, and I've talked about my Parkinson's diagnosis, but I want people without Parkinson's to enjoy this podcast. I want people that just randomly find this podcast and listen in to go, there's something compelling about this. And that's my goal. That's my aspiration. I want people to benefit from this podcast, to take something away. And so why do an episode called The Story of You? And why talk about you? Because your story matters. One thing I've learned in my diagnosis journey is the value of self-advocacy and how, as a patient in healthcare, whether it's Parkinson's or any other chronic illness or any sickness at all, how important it is for us to self-advocate, to stand up for ourselves, and to demand that we get the treatment or the medication or the attention medically that we need, right? And to be an advocate for ourselves. That's a huge part of what we need to do nowadays. And with that, because of my social media blogging and vlogging or whatever you call it, my recounting of lessons learned, I realized through this that I do have a story that's unique to myself. It's unique and only I can tell it. And that's important from a Parkinson's perspective because Parkinson's, it's called a snowflake condition because it doesn't affect any two people exactly alike. Just like there's no two snowflakes alike, right? So my story is important from that perspective because I bring a certain angle to the Parkinson's diagnosis that no one else can do. So it's important that I speak up and I share about what's going on in my life and what's happening and how it's progressing, things like that, because it's important as we all kind of gather facts and information about this horrible disease, right? But it's beyond that. See, the importance of everybody's story. What's the latest statistic? I think there's in 2025, I think there's like 8.3 billion people in the world now. 8.3 billion. It's a lot of people, right? But I'm the only Mark Milow that's out there. I mean, there's other people that might be named Mark Milow, but I'm the only Mark Milow with my DNA. I'm the only me that there is in this world. And for better or worse, I'm unique. And so my story brings an angle or a paradigm that no one else can share. So that's a lesson that I've learned through my diagnosis journey and through my Parkinson's journey that I want to pass on to you. As you're sitting there listening to this, maybe you're in your car, maybe you're driving around, maybe you're at home, you're maybe mopping the floor, or folding laundry, or maybe even downing a beer while you're watching TV. I don't know. But I want you to understand that your story matters, that you matter. And I know that may come as a shock and a revelation to some, because I know that there's some people out there that just don't feel like their story matters. They don't feel like that they're significant at all, that anybody really truly does care. And I'm here to tell you, you do matter. The perspective that you bring, the angle that you bring to this world, the unique talents, abilities, and gifts that you have, they matter, and you matter. So I want to make sure that you understand that today. And with that comes a conversation about something that I never thought I would ever talk about, ever. Self-care. I am not the poster boy for self-care. You look at me and I'm a bit overweight. And frankly, throughout most of my life, self-care has been something that I've laughed at, the concept of self-care. I've always seen it as something that foofy, wealthy people do. Self-care, it's like an extravagance that they can afford, but I can't. But there's a definition of self-care that's far more applicable, far more pragmatic. And the more that I've moved along in my journey, the more I realize that self-care is critical. Self-care is hugely important. What I realized is that no one's going to take care of me but me. And I'm not talking about a selfish attitude here, because you can be somebody that's others centered and still take care of yourself. In fact, you'll be better equipped to take care of other people if you take care of yourself. That's something that caregivers really struggle with, and something that I remember a pastor telling the story one time about a lumberjack that went out into the woods and was chopping down trees with his fellow lumberjacks, and his numbers were the highest in production. He was just the best lumberjack that was out there. And he just had a heart for this and really had a passion for doing his work. So when it came break time and everybody else was taking their breaks, he would work to his break and just keep going. Just keep chopping down trees, chopping at trees, and keep going. But over the course of time, the production numbers of all the other people around him began to rise and his began to fall. And he couldn't understand it. And so one day he was mumbling to himself and said, I don't understand it. I worked so hard. I worked through my breaks. Why is my production dropping? And why is their production rising? And an old lumberjack came around the tree that he was standing by and said, "Son, when we go to break time, that's when we sharpen our axes. You're not taking your break time, so you're not sharpening your axe. So you're out here working hard, but you're getting less done because you're not taking care of your axe. That is what makes you productive." And I heard that analogy and I thought, wow, that's pretty good. Now, define axe however you want. But I'm going to say with me, one thing I've learned, and again, this is not Parkinson specific, this is life in general, right? But I need to take care of my physical self, my mental health, my spiritual health. And when we talk about physical health, there's just the physical health that I have in my life, but then there's also, I have the added layer of a diagnosis of a chronic illness, right? And so that the taking care of myself has extra depth there. Because, and let me share this, and I don't want to go off on a Parkinson's tangent, but the only thing proven to slow down the progression of Parkinson's is exercise, movement, and physical activity. That's the only thing proven at this point to slow the progression of Parkinson's. So if I am not exercising, if I'm not moving, if I'm not grooving, if I'm not um, staying up on that, I'm not taking care of myself. In fact, I'm actively allowing Parkinson's to progress, and I'm not fighting it. That's not only irresponsible, that's unconscionable. But I do it because I get busy in my life, and I prioritize other people in front of me and other things in front of me, right? And so one of the lessons I've learned again is self-care. In self-care is I need to make time for that. I need to make time to make sure I exercise, to make sure that I'm getting the rest that I need. That's a huge thing. And also to eat right. And that's the one thing right now, frankly, that I'm struggling with the most. It's not that I eat horrible, but I could eat better. And sometimes that requires prepping food, and I don't take the time to do that. So I do quick recipes. I don't get fast food. I'm at a better place now with my eating habits that I don't get the fast food and stuff like that. But I use quick recipes when I should be using some better recipes that have better ingredients and natural ingredients, things like that, if that makes sense. Diet, exercise, and rest. It's been said in the Parkinson circle that's the holy trinity of Parkinson's care, and I don't mean that to offend anybody that's religious, but you understand the point. Those three are so critical as you look at battling Parkinson's. Diet, exercise, and rest. They're just huge, but those are huge in everybody's life. You don't have to have Parkinson's to have that important, right? And to take care of yourself physically is, again, it's a responsible thing. It's not a selfish thing. And some of you out there, I come from a life of faith. I was brought up into adulthood thinking of servant leadership. You lead by example. You lead by serving others. So you're constantly putting people in front of yourself, and from a priority standpoint. So some people really have a hard time with that. I personally have struggled with this. Huge. But I cannot serve others adequately or efficiently if I'm not taking care of myself. And again, it boils down to practical steps: diet, exercise, rest, making sure I do things that I enjoy, because that helps my mental health. And trust me, I've struggled. My mental health has been the biggest thing that I've struggled with throughout my Parkinson's journey. Mental health, because my worst symptoms with Parkinson's are depression, anxiety, and apathy. And so my mental health is a huge part of my focus. So I have to be doing things that I enjoy. I have to be doing things that I like. Now, that doesn't mean like filling my life with entertainment, but it means maintaining things in my life that bring me joy and fulfillment. Those things energize me. This podcast is an example of that. It was on the suggestion of two therapists, a life coach, and a psychologist friend of mine that I get back into podcasting for my mental health. So this podcast is for you, yes, but it's also for me. I enjoy this. I love this. I'm a storyteller, like I've said before, and I love this. But this type of expression fulfills me. It gives me energy. So I do this as one of those things, those non-negotiables. I've got to leave something like this in my life to make sure that I'm giving myself that positive spark that I need. It's huge for my mental health. You have no idea what this does for my mental health to be able to do this kind of thing. I love it so much. I do. I enjoy it. I love storytelling. I love letting people tell their stories. It's just something that I do. I remember back in high school, a friend of mine would come up to each other, and we wanted to know how the other one was doing mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. So we'd walk up to each other and we would just say, MEPS, 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 MEPS. That meant that I wanted to know how she was doing mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And she would give me a rundown. And the same applies today. Those are the things that I want to focus on in my life: my mental health, emotional health, physical health, and spiritual health. Those are critical to my life, but they're also critical to your life. Now, you may not be a religious person, but your spiritual health is still significant. It's still important. How you address that or deal with that, I leave up to you. Which, by the way, that's another point. No, self-care is individual. Don't let anybody tell you your self-care has to look one way or another. And that leads me into today's Mark My Words. So if somebody comes into your life and says, you have to do this to be whatever. You have to do this to be happy. You have to do this to be healthy. You have to do this to be taking care of yourself appropriately. I'm going to call bull. I'm going to call bull, and I'll leave it there so my rating is not affected, my language. I call BS. If somebody says you have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and jog, otherwise you're not asserting yourself in physical training, or you have to do this to fight your chronic illness adequately. You have to be doing this or that. No. That person does not know what they're talking about. They're giving their opinion, okay? And their opinion and $1 will buy you a cup of coffee, as my dad used to say, right? Of course, nowadays it's a lot more than $1 to buy a cup of coffee. But anyways, the point being, it's just their opinion, okay? So in my push forward with my Mark My Words today, do not let anybody insist that you do this or that. Do not listen to anybody to the point where you give in to your convictions to do something the way somebody else wants you to do it. Don't do that. Do what works for you. Do what you need to do for you. And here's a good example of that. So with Parkinson's, there's something that my Parky brothers and sisters, my brethren will understand: the fatigue that comes with Parkinson's. I'm not talking tiredness. I'm talking fatigue. And I've never known such fatigue until I had Parkinson's. I have known tiredness. Most of my adult life, I've been in management. I've worked 10, 12, 14 hours a day, multiple days, weeks on end. I've owned my own businesses and therefore rarely got days off. And I've known tiredness my whole adult life. I'm not talking about tiredness. I'm talking about a fatigue factor that is off the chart, that can be sudden and immediate and disabling. There's a fatigue that comes with Parkinson's that is along those lines, okay? And as such, I know my limits, and I know when I've hit that wall and I can't go any further. And as an example, I had a friend that wanted to go do something, recreationally with me. And I mentioned to them that, well, yes, I can do that, but when this happens, I'm done. And the response was like, well, what do you mean done? I'm like, well, I know my limits. It's like the old Clint Eastwood line in one of his movies: a man's got to know his limitations, right? I know my limitations. And when that comes, I've got to stop. And this friend of mine didn't understand that and got a little huffy with me. And I'm like, you got to understand. I know my limitations. And I know when that comes. And those of you out there listening that are in the Parky world, you guys know what I'm talking about. When that fatigue hits you and you've lost everything that you have for that day, and maybe even into the next day. I don't care anymore about what people think. If fatigue hits me and I'm on my way to a social event, I cancel. I don't care. Because you know what? None of them care. I mean, they do. They say they do. They call me on the phone and they'll tell me they do. But they don't. They're not at my bedside when I'm aching that night and when I'm trying to get up the next morning and I can't because the fatigue carried over to the next day so bad. I mean, they're not there at that point. So they may care, but they really don't care from the perspective of where I do. Only I know my limitations, and I have to stand up for that. And if there's anybody in your life that's pushing you to do something that you shouldn't do from a health perspective, don't do it. Don't do it. And you don't have to have a chronic illness for this to apply. I mean, it could be anything. But those of you out there that have chronic illnesses, whether it's Parkinson's or MS or whatever, you understand your limitations and other people don't. And you simply have to push that aside and not care and do what's best for you. That is the responsible thing right there. That is the responsible thing for you to do. Okay. Okay. Getting off my soapbox here a little bit. So, I want to talk about tenacity a little bit. There's a couple of things I like to talk about. One is tenacity. Another one is resilience. I like talking about those topics. I think that to get through life, you have to have a specific amount, at least a certain amount of tenacity. And especially if you're dealing with a substantial amount of adverse conditions or circumstances, it doesn't have to be a chronic illness. Maybe it's your finances. Maybe it's a family situation. Maybe it's, living conditions. Maybe it could be anything, right? And as individuals, we have to be tenacious. We have to be able to reach down inside and grab that extra something and pull it out when we need to. And that's not hard. That's not easy to do. I mean, somebody like me that struggles with depression so much, I can find it very easy to give in to the depression, and I have. Maybe I'll do an episode about this sometime. In fact, maybe for suicide prevention, I'll talk about this a little more. But I have on my wrist a semicolon, which some of you may recognize from the Semicolon Project, is a symbol for to let life continue, to not give in to suicide. Because you use a semicolon in a sentence when the sentence could end, but you decide to let the thought go on. So use a semicolon to let the thought in the story continue on. So you're encouraged to use a semicolon instead of ending the sentence and putting a period, right? I almost gave into that battle at one point, and so the tattoo's a reminder. Like I said, maybe I'll do an episode about that come Suicide Prevention Month or something. But tenacity is something that we all need. We all have to have, and there's some people that have more than others. But I saw an example recently that I felt was like a perfect example, perfect visual of tenacity, of a tenacious little critter. It was about, I don't know, maybe a week ago, 5 days ago or something. I saw this news story about a bear that broke into a house, and this little 5-pound Pomeranian came charging and scared the bear out of the house and then chased the bear off the property. The dog was not giving up. It was just going gung-ho after this bear. And, you think of the old saying, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's like the size of the fight in the dog, right? The old saying, but it's true. And I love people that exemplify tenacity. I love tenacious people. I have a good friend on social media, Mel, that I think is one of the most tenacious people that I know. She's gone through so much. And she's honest and she's real and she's genuine. She's authentic. She talks about the struggles she goes through, but she also has a smile on her face and she has joy and she makes other people happy. And I think of my friend Mel, and to me, she's one of the very definitions of tenacious behavior, of a tenacious person. And I see her like that little 5-pound Pomeranian. And maybe she can't run that much. Maybe she can't run that fast, but she's got a tenacious spirit, and I love her for it. And guys, sometimes people misunderstand that tenacity. They don't quite understand it. Don't let that stop you. Stay strong, be tenacious, okay? Just a little thought there. Again, this is my opinion for tonight. Tonight's episode is all about you, okay? So I've talked about how you matter and how self-care matters and the need to be tenacious matters. Those are some things that will help you in your life because they've helped me in my life, and I'm just sharing the things to you that have helped me. Okay. I just want you to feel free to pursue those things that will make you better. And it's tough because some of us were raised with certain constraints. Some of us are raised with certain ideologies or limitations, social limitations put on us, and we have to overcome those things. But in the end, I'm telling you, no one's going to take care of you but you. I found this out after my diagnosis, after, well, I'll just say a lot of family situations exploded at some point. And I'll just leave it at that. So, guys, not everybody's going to understand your journey, but that's okay. It's your journey. It's your story. Okay. By the way, guys, I've talked about my diagnosis, and I'll actually do an entire episode on my diagnosis. And I'll talk about that at length. But I've talked about my diagnosis. I haven't told you about my brother. My brother came to me, and he was kind of upset and distraught, and he's like not happy. And I was like, Dave, what's going on, man? And he said, I just found out that I'm colorblind. And I tell you, it really came out of the purple. So he had his own struggles to face there. His colorblindness came out of the purple. So, yeah. Anyway, okay. I don't have my drum, my rim shot ready. So, anyway. But guys, on that note, another thing that's helped me, I talked about tenacity, and I've talked about self-care, and those things. But another thing that helps me along the way is my sense of humor. And you may argue, may not. You may argue that I don't even have a sense of humor, or you may argue that it's really a sense of humor at all. But my sense of humor, how I address things, how I deal with things, is my sense of humor. And those that know me know that when I'm not doing well, I'm not joking about things. So if I'm engaging in self-deprecating humor, poking fun at myself, if I'm laughing at myself for the mistakes I've made, if I'm laughing even about the Parkinson's, if I'm joking about that, I'm doing okay. When those jokes stop, that's when my friends get concerned. Because when those jokes stop, that's when things aren't right. So guys, I will attempt to engage in some humor on this podcast. You may argue the fact that this stuff's not even funny. Dad jokes I love. I have some other stuff planned as well. But humor is how I deal with things. Not just humor. I also like to do impressions, which are not the best, but I enjoy doing them. Actually, on my drive to work, I do impressions. I do impersonations. In fact, one of the ones I like doing, I'm lacking a prop here to use for a phone, but so I'll pretend I've got a phone in my hand. But here's an impersonation for you. I don't know what you want. I don't know who you are. If it's ransom you want, I can tell you I don't have money. But what I do have are a particular set of skills. Skills I've acquired over a very long career. Skills that make me a nightmare for a man like you. Is that okay? Is that decent? Yeah. The last episode I recorded, I did a little bit of a Stallone episode that has not aired yet, so you'll hear my Stallone episode. And then, of course, Arnold. I do a very, very pathetic Arnold. But I like to do impersonations, things like that make me chuckle and laugh. That's what I like to do. If you guys follow me on social media, you'll see that. I talk about Parkinson's, and I there's some of my posts I'm crying my eyes out because I'm so desperate, I'm so upset, I'm so frustrated, I'm so angry. But a lot of my posts are silly and nonsensical because that's part of my life. My account, my social media. This podcast is about life with Parkinson's. It's not about Parkinson's. It's about life with Parkinson's. And how I live my life with Parkinson's is to include humor, is to try and find the funny in things, to find the humorous, to find the positive. And so you'll always get a bit of that from me. Okay. And if you don't, then check on me, because maybe I'm not doing so well. Okay. All right, guys. So I'm at the point I'm going to wrap up here. I've talked plenty. I've talked long enough. Hopefully this show means something to somebody out there. Hopefully somebody will get something out of this. It's that time for the end of the show, the segment I call Get to the Chopper.
Get to the chopper!
Now, get to the chopper. This is the time where we're at the end of the mission. The choppers are coming to pick us up and take us home. It's what's called exfil time instead of infiltration. It's exfiltration. We're being removed and taken back home. And we look back over the podcast here and talk about what's important. What's the most important thing? What's the takeaway, right? And today's takeaway, I'll remind you back to what I said in the Mark My Words segment. Do what's right for you. Do what's right for you. Okay? Don't let anybody tell you what you should be doing for your own physical health, mental health, emotional health, spiritual health. I mean, you can get advice, get counsel. I'm not saying don't do that. The doctor can tell you, these exercises are good and stuff. But you can have a bunch of other people that come up and just give you their opinion. Okay? Go to experts. The people with their opinions, like, if you eat 4 blueberries every meal, you're going to get... No, right? So find what works for you and do what works for you. Okay? That's my takeaway for the day. That's my get to the chopper. Okay? And by the way, I mentioned my social media. For those of you that are looking for me on Instagram and on TikTok, you can find me at Mark in the Park 21. And on Facebook, I've got a group, Mark in the Park 21. It's a Facebook group, a Parkinson's group talking about Parkinson's and things like that. So, and also, this podcast can be found on YouTube. On YouTube, just look for Mark in the Park podcast, and there I am. So if you're looking for me there you go. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap up. Guys, thank you so much for watching. If you've lasted to the very end here, I applaud you. Let's give you a hand, because you deserve it. If you like the show, guys, again, like and subscribe, that kind of stuff. Please comment. I'm looking for some comments. Please comment. And I'd like you, if you don't mind, to rate the show. The higher the better, but, give us your fair opinion. But you could hedge on the positive side, and, but that's how we grow the audience. So please do that if you don't mind. And if you want to reach me, it's in the show notes, but you can reach me at markintheparkpodcast@gmail.com. That's markintheparkpodcast@gmail.com. So you can email me, send me your show ideas or thoughts, guest ideas, give me your opinion, tell me that I've got great dimples. You can do whatever you want. Just email. So there you go. So anyways, thanks guys for listening, for sticking with me. I appreciate you guys so much. And until next time, guys, let's keep a positive attitude and let's keep exploring. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon. Thanks for joining me on this edition of Mark in the Park, the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and leave a review. Your support helps more people discover the show. For show notes, updates, and future episodes, or to connect, head over to markinthepark21.com. Got a guest idea or a topic suggestion? Drop me a line at markintheparkpodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. And to all my listeners, this is Mark Milow reminding you, life is as much about the journey as the destination. So enjoy the sights and sounds along the way. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep exploring.